Okay, so we've finished our presentations and papers for these 2 days, and now we have a slot for discussion. Yeah, we wanted for this slot to not only focus on general points, as maybe we did a bit earlier, which was an introduction in small groups discussion on the theme of agency. So now, because all of you are already sort of going almost 2 years within the projects, we have a lot of case studies, we have a lot of methodologies being displayed. So we want to tackle a bit the question of methods in these new group discussions. So one good way, I think, to do this is to go back to your original group. So respect your original group, where you had these discussions about the different dimensions that Nikki had put up. And now let's look at how those issues, so the issue of agency, I know, is a very broad one, but we can still divide it and take a specific approach to it, and look at how this issue is tackled methodologically. So what I want you to focus on is a series of questions. First question is, what do you consider your methodological success in the project? So, but I would like this not to be a list of everything you've done. Yeah, but just a highlight, something that really, and maybe that's something that surprised you, that you didn't expect it would work out that way. Yeah. The second question is, what do you think are the methodological shortcomings, not of your project, but when tackling this issue, what do you think it's missing in terms of methodologies? What should we have more? The third question, lots of questions. The third question is, in an ideal world, maybe of unlimited funding, what types of methodologies you would like to see? Yeah, what would be necessary in methodological terms to tackle this issue of agency and to explore the kinds of things we're exploring? So, for example, some might say, a psychologist would say, well, more longitudinal studies. Yeah, we want more longitudinal studies over time, and we need budget, for 10 years to do that, and so on. So. It's not about what we need, but what types of methods we would need more. And finally, and I think this is a very important issue, of course, science in this question of agency also plays an important role. We've sort of assumed this discourse lately, and Flora and I had this discussion the other day, that science should be useful to society, which has an implicit assumption that somehow science is not useful. Yeah, that's one thing, that we're useless. And secondly, what does this mean? Yeah, what does this really mean in terms of what we do and the relevance of what we do? Is it not that sometimes, like we discuss in social innovation, for example, that maybe also scientists need a space where they do not engage so much. They need that isolated space for a short while to sort of have the right distance maybe or not. I don't want to get into a philosophical discussion really about, like approaches to science and all that, but just discuss a bit, what does this mean? Also in terms of methodologies. Yeah? And so I'll finish with a quote, because Flora really liked this quote. The more complete quote is by Kurt Lewin. He said, "There's nothing so theoretical as a good method, and nothing so practical as a good theory." So, yeah, we can start from there and discuss. We have a coffee break at 5:15. We have a coffee break at 5:15. You can then just go and take coffee, and if you want, you can continue with the group discussions during the coffee break. Okay.
By implication, too. That's true. Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to take notes. I'm just thinking if we're to report back one highlight, and we have 4 questions.
Yeah, how to do that?
Yeah. And we're supposed to answer each of them for each of the projects represented.
And I don't even have a project, so I'm easy that way. So that makes it simpler.
And we're with different projects as well, right?
Yes.
4 different ones, yeah.
And I could offer some insights just generally, but not for projects.
Wow.
So,
who's the leader?
whoever noted down the questions.
I know the questions.
Oh, great, yeah. Finally,
The first
one.
question was, what methodologically what was the methodologically success of the project?
Okay, should we start with that?
Yeah.
To be not confused?
Yeah.
You're glamorous, right?
No, arts.
Sorry. You start.
Oh. I mean, it was related to agency. Yeah? I mean, we have an agency perspective implicit in, but it's not really that we developed the methodology. I mean, the agency in our project, how we approached it was like that we said, okay, if we look at change, we look at those who do the change, that are the actors. And it's just not to have a to move away from the MLP systemic perspective and say, okay, there are people out which do changing things. And that's all. There's not a special methodology. But if I see it more general terms, what is success? I mean, I think we did quite something normal, asking people, triangulate between them. So there's no extraordinary thing. I think what is really a highlight, what I really like, is that we have not planned it, but we have it in the project, like a participatory approach that just developed because we need to be engaged with those. Mm-hmm. So, and we got a lot of inside information and resources just through participating in their events. When the Transition Town movement meets, when they have some other events, I think that for us it's the highlight. And as having implemented participatory research the last years before as well, I would say that's so the participatory thing, to cut it down to one word or 2 words, would be the success of arts. But only in the Dresden case, I would say, is that really I can claim. I'm not sure about the other regions if they would see the same. Probably.
You were on the success question?
Yes.
I missed one sentence. Investigating the lifestyle changes towards sustainable consumption in an integrated way. Integrated can be
I'm sorry, you need to speak up a little because there's a lot of
investigating the lifestyle changes towards sustainable consumption in an integrated manner.
Oh, you said integrated?
Integrated, yes. Micro, micro, among different types of
That sounds more conceptual. Sorry if I'm asking back.
Yeah,
if we can do this, then it would be a mythological success. Yeah, but if you want to modify it or change it or just erase it.
Yeah, it's not only conceptual, so it's this idea that we could look at, when we look at lifestyle change, find a way of connecting methodologically those two levels. So looking at the micro level, so what happens within intra-individually in a way, and also in small groups, what are the phenomena that happen. But then how do you combine those with very large level contextual influences that are systems and all that? There's a link missing there. I think there's the whole debate we're having. It's very disciplinary. So psychology studies the micro level, systems theories study the systems level, but there's not too much said about those influences. Psychology takes that up, but not too much. So it doesn't say too much about it. Level, those factors at the macro level influence behavior, and possibilities for lifestyle change, taking up lifestyle change, and so on. So I think the way we're doing that basically is combining social science, traditional methodologies, surveys and interviews and focus groups and all that, with the modeling. Yeah, so I think that's the methodological success, let's say. Not just in general terms, just in terms of how you would put them into first microeconomic models, so they already have some contextual factors like prices and then you have the macro systems, how you aggregate that, which is what market does.
For example, we thought that this agency is specially bounded. So, for example, if you investigate the impact of micro-level intervention at one geographic point, then maybe a success story. But obviously, since we have heterogeneity among different geographical points, then what matters at one aggregate level is the interaction and the co-evolution of the system. So obviously you need to adopt a different methodology of modeling practice. And probably the success story at this particular geographic level may have harmful effects even on the others. So to be able to investigate those effects, you have, let's say, different approach at different levels to see their interaction and probably use the final effect at the macro level.
And the challenge there is really to make those assumptions precise enough so that you can actually, be able to model without distorting too much. So what psychological theories say, for example, which is easy to distort when you put them in models.
And I guess that's what I would say, even though I'm not reporting it out on any specific project, that I would feel like is a methodological success for the work that I've done has been to offer, a level of precision and measurement in concepts that people didn't think were measurable. And so even if people disagree with me, that's in terms of how I've measured it, that's fine, but at least now we're having a real conversation. So I feel like it moves the field forward in some ways that might not have happened before. So,
could you give an example of such concept?
Yeah, place attachment or place meanings. That people said, oh, well, you can't measure place meanings quantitatively, and you can't compare them across populations, and you can't compare them across settings. And well, I have, and so you can disagree with that, and you can say, well, you've done it wrong, or you shouldn't be doing it that way. But to me, it takes what's a success about it is not necessarily that I've done it, but it's moved the conversation in science to a new position where it wasn't before. So I look at that as a success.
It's really tolerating simplification. It's about that.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be perfect. So you tolerate it, and then you can work with it. That's something that I discovered that's very interesting in the methodological collaborations with modelers, because they really force you to think in precise terms about
Exactly.
like we had these discussions in a previous project. They were asking us all the time, so what's the rate of normative transmission? They call it like that. So what makes a person more susceptible to normative influence than another? Well, it depends. It's what psychologists always say. It depends on this and on that.
But let's be precise about what we mean by it depends. Depends on what. For one of those interaction effects.
One of the points that we realized that when the sociologist or the psychologist you're enumerating the possible factors, it amounts to infinity. But most of the time we need some, let's say, main driving force or a hierarchy between those factors and so on. Most of the time it's not possible to come up with one particular factor which dominates the even defining those things, 1, 2, or 3, but in a quantum manner, can also be
I think for pathways it's partly the same, like the combination of modeling and the other perspectives, and that you are forced to really be clear on what you mean with something. But I've most experience in the project on the MLP perspective level, and I think what we add there is that we not only look at one niche and how it's developing, but also compare niches and also have a look like we can, for example, as a niche consume less meat, but what will then be the effect on the other niches? So that's a kind of comparative analysis, but it's maybe not really a methodology, but more conceptually, but it's maybe somewhere in between of these things.
But then I have to add something as now. It's interesting to see what people report on methodology, because I was really more on the techniques to collect empirical data. But but it's more taken generally. I would say the added value of arts and what we do there is really that we try to look at dynamics in between these regions that came just across when you said what you do, and because that's also going beyond studying niches, but really studying interactions and dynamics which occur between them. That's the other perspective, I would say, the new perspective we look at that. But the techniques to collect it are pretty much the same we do over the years.
Yeah, that's for us the same. Like, there's not really methodologically seen something really new on it. And for you?
Yeah, but no, I'm just thinking, because I will have to report on this if I, well, not if I have to, but probably. I guess we're cohering around a particular issue, because also in transit, there is a move beyond the NLP. There's a lot of studying the multi-level perspective on transitions. So there is a focus on multiple niches, multiple transition initiatives.
Greater insight in terms of the use of power, the way in which people make decisions. So what I'm getting at is it may be a very different kind of methodology that we should be looking at, which is actually, as I say, going to people and finding out what influences them, and going to various social movements and school operations, and actually changing the way they learn about energy, changing the way they learn about waste, changing the way they learn about society. Actively engaging with a transformative process in terms of their learning. That's what Marina was trying to get to us, is that there was a learning process inside his diagram. But you actually is designing your methodology for transformative change, rather than simply modelling transformative change as if it is something got its own natural pathway and nothing else. You're actually creating the conditions for the transformative change by getting involved in social learning and social engagement. And that takes me to a further stage, which is where I think the next round of research would be whether the university is actually an active agent in getting a city to start, and neighbourhoods to start thinking about low energy living. In other words, working with the business, working with the churches, working with the schools, working with the local authorities, to get them to be part of a transformational process. This is what I'm hoping I'm going to be working with you on. So that's actually a model where the university is an agent of change. It's not studying change, it's an agent of change. And I actually feel that's the bit, and I said this yesterday, but I'm saying it again now because it's the end of this meeting. It's at least worth reflecting. Isn't that a kind of methodology we should be looking at, where we're actually actively part of shaping the change, but doing so in dialogue with a whole host of players, not just doing it our own way.
And also at the same time, at least that's the type of science I'm doing, because then at the same time you can see what works and doesn't work, because you can also more or less control the process of change in a way. So you're promoting change, but at the same time, as a researcher, being involved but also detached, see it didn't work, it worked, what was the methodology that was used, who was the player that didn't participate, that was a key element. So we are doing a bit of that in Portugal as well, of promoting change, but not become full activists, although probably we should become, but keep as a researcher, otherwise we also lose this reflectiveness that we also want activists to have. So it's a bit, I think we are coming together. We see that a lot in Portugal, that the more the researcher becomes a practitioner and keeps reflecting, the more the activist also starts being self-reflective, and instead of engaging on this path that you just do on the rabbit hole.
Although there's also a risk that the researcher becomes less reflective.
But then
that happens as well.
For example, but that's why we do research in a group, and usually I have the role of not going into the field and give feedback from a more objective point of view.
Have you ever heard of groupthink?
Sorry?
Have you ever heard of groupthink?
No.
It's you have?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is part of what we get as this happens all the time.
Yes.
As a way. But if you look at the piece of work you're thinking of doing, or are doing, around adaptation post-Paris, if I have to say, if I was in your shoes, just give you an example of what we're doing on the coastline of Norfolk, the best people to work with are the insurance companies, the development people, and the local planners and the enterprise people who are interested in inward investment. Because a coast, in the next 10 or 15 years, what happens to property on the coast is a big issue. It's a big issue. It's a really big issue because it affects the psychology of economic activity. If you've got a business and people are no longer investing next to you, you're going to get very nervous about your future. So you need a mechanism whereby directly engaging with insurance, developers, planners, enterprise, as well as the community, starts a process of actually a dialogue of how a coast might change from a whole host of things, from not just its economics, its real adaptation planning, but into the context of actually redesigning the settlement and the infrastructure for the next 50 years. I would do the same with you and your forest people. I would take an area of something of the order of 50 landowners and actually engage with them, with the fire people, with the water companies, with the flood protection people, with the insurance people, with the rural development people and so on. Get them all into a series of workshops as to how these woodlands might look in terms of their perspectives over the next 50 years. So rather than deal with the woodlot owners, I would deal with a whole series of players which are influencing the way a woodlot could be interpreted and used, especially things like fire hazard treatment, which is a big deal.
I think it's not difficult to engage the people.
It isn't.
No, it's very easy. They are looking forward to participate and to be. It's more difficult to engage university people than in communities, because
you mean getting them to engage in the communities? Or engaging with university people?
It's more difficult to engage professors and researchers in practical issues in the field.
That's what I'm driving at. That's exactly the point I'm driving at.
It's much more difficult because we are doing in our project the workshops and meetings with people in a field, in a territory, and they are going and they are very engaged. But researchers just go when we provoke them.
Yeah, I know what you mean. They're not doing it as part of that.
It's not a part of their academic life. So it's a very huge gap between academic life and field work.
I've also linking with the output thing and methodologies and models. One of the things that I'm keeping from this last conference was that about this citizen science. If we could provide sheets for the practitioners to fill, or models that organizations could probably implement for 2 years on how to best, because there are associations, NGOs, companies that want to promote sustainable energies for all reasons, food security, whatever. If we could provide them with some of these models or techniques or whatever, but also something for them to feel, and after each meeting they could say it worked, didn't work. I mean, but an easy thing, we might get a lot of good field data without needing to go there and ask, okay, how long are you doing that? Was it good or not good? Because it's passive time also for the person. He's not gaining with that. But if we give this to NGOs that are on the field and they get new methodologies and techniques and what to do or not to do, because research is saying that it didn't work in other places, so it won't work in your place. They see the benefit even before they start doing it, and if they see the benefit, they also start giving back because they know that they will receive better information. Could that also support having better data for models and also tests without needing to manipulate society too much?
No, it seems to me that self-reporting on initiatives, there's possibilities there, also some risks, of course. In terms of the models, I think the big problem is not so much the data they have, but the way they represent the world and the way they optimize, and which is kind of purely on an optimal carbon price, the lowest carbon price. So there's very little room to put any other variables in there.
I'm going to look to you two, since we've got this wonderful little group. The question lies behind your point, Fatima, as far as I'm concerned, is actually the credibility you've got as researchers when it comes to the community you're dealing with. If they can see you as a force for good, somebody who can help them, someone who can provide them with advice or give them encouragement or give them some leadership or what, act as an agent for them in relation to other players, they'll give you everything. And you could distinguish between someone who's talking to you and someone who's giving you everything that they think is relevant to you.
Yeah.
People will talk to you, but they may hold back all kinds of stuff because they don't really trust you, or they don't really want to get involved, or they're too busy, they can't be bothered. The stuff that really counts in this transition material is what's called authentic communication. Where people are speaking from their hearts, from their soul, from their expectations of the future. And when they open up at that level, you have what I call intuitive bonding. I spend a lot of time with my students on this method of research. You've got to be able to talk to people in such a way that they can say, I like this person, I see what they're trying to do, I can be helped by them, but I can only be helped by them if I'm genuine. And the whole exercise is genuine. You've got to be genuine. You can't go in there and just use their information and take it away and stick it into a computer and forget about them. There is actually an aftermath to this, which is a personal relationship you can't get away. This is real methodology question. And very few faculty want to do that. It's time consuming, it's exposing to them, it's a completely different science what they're used to, it's far more intimate, and they say, that's not where I want to be. But in terms of the authenticity of the evidence and the value of the what I call the ambassadorial role, it is streets ahead of any other methodology. So that's what and I would say the same thing with adaptation. In other words, the people themselves have to learn and also be the teachers. They're telling us something as well as learning from us. Now, I'm sure you're doing this. I'm just saying we need to put this on the table for this evening. It's very important.
Can I just...
I'll give all that in Lisbon, I'll tell you.
For example, one of the things we did, and that I did in a project of mine, was that when I went to communities and wanting to work with them, we put all of ourselves there, including financial stuff. And some of the initiatives were really about, well, if we are talking real serious, how do you want me to be serious to you when we know that you're coming for a fancy hotel, you pay 150 euros a night, we are volunteers working, you made us spend like 3 hours answering your questions and we'll not ever see you again. I mean, do you want me to be real? This is what reality is. So we start designing that when we stay there, we stay in their homes, we pay them. So it nurtures the initiative. We stay there as people as well, because if you're not doing your 3 hours stuff, then you're yourself, right? But this demanded the researcher to change, and we are always telling them, they don't change, they have difficulty to change. But when it comes to us, I need to be objective. And some of us even cried while doing this sharing. But the bond was so strong that I can call them at 3 o'clock in the morning and say, I need something, and they will be there if needed, or the opposite. Because we start being at service and genuine. But of course this doesn't happen to everything. I mean, I work with mayors and not often this happens, but going that way, that's really big. But that's also
how you do this. Like if you stay with somebody at home, you really bond. And after, as a scientist with probably a title that you're using, giving credibility to your position, you publish on it. You have a certain authority. After that, do you really point it out? For example, if the people involved seem to be misunderstanding certain things or seem to be in conflict with others. How do you stay authentic there? I mean, are you being nice to them? Do you unmitigated just criticize them as an independent researcher? That's speaking about the authenticity. I think a lot of authenticity is to me is lost if you somehow pretend not to be that independent researcher. At least that's how I've grown to be a researcher.
I honestly think it raises the issue, which I'm hoping we'll get on the table,
Model that we have in our worldview, in our kind of capitalist system, needs to happen, and that's what people in a lot of the civil society initiatives that we're studying are talking about.
That's what people were talking about in the 1970s as well. If you look at the environmental movement then and the civil society movement that's trying to create transition now, there's similar tensions, there's similar differences between the radical outsiders who are against capitalism and the ones who think that within the system you can modify.
But you don't
things.
think there's any significant qualitative differences between then and now?
There are significant differences, but there are also a lot of similarities that we could learn from.
Well,
in terms of political strategies, in terms of innovation strategies, in terms of how long this should take. If you look at the cleanup, I wanted to show you this graph. Hold on. Look, this is the improvement in oxygen in the water, and this is the improvement in biodiversity, different species. This is the River Rhine, this is the River Elbe in Germany. It follows that same logistic curve that Frank Hales put into Arurip's scheme about transitions. This is a transition.
And that's partly a story of clean-up and new technologies, and it's partly a story of deindustrialization.
It's partly deindustrialization, but it's also about putting filters, recycling water, forcing municipalities to clean their water. It's all of that. It's behind this is an enormous, complex network of actions that happen. Right. But if you look at the amount of stuff that we had to do to achieve this, and the technological innovations involved, the companies, the governments, the environmentalists, there are examples there. You can say that what we need to do with energy and our carbon system and climate change is qualitatively different, but still, if you look at this, it's a considerable scale. This was a major change in how we dealt with our water. It's another cycle of stuff that materials that we use. But that's where I hesitate when you say stability is what we need to understand. Because at the same time, I see change happening all the time already. Some of it positive. Even though I'm a profound pessimist, I don't think we'll fix this one. But there's change.
Yeah,
and successful examples.
Yeah, but hang on. So I'm not saying that you only need to understand stability. I'm just saying that you need to do that as well. That's something that needs to be brought into this sustainability kind of research field more. So I acknowledge that kind of all of those changes in the environmental sphere have been going on in Europe over the last several decades, and also that there isn't really ever a stability as such. You have trends though, so like if you look at household practices, the social practice series have done good work on this, and washing machines, these are practices that are stable over time, but there's also always trends.
I remember the days we used to throw our bottles in the garbage. So even our practices in the households have changed a little bit, not enough, but I think if we understand how we did it the previous time, we can learn and do it again. And we'll have to do it again and again and again and again. We'll have to continue doing it. But there are examples of how we did it in the past, which involved innovation, involved change regulation.
But it's like if you think about yourself in your own life, how many times in a year are you really kind of exhibiting agency in terms of decision making about making your lifestyle more sustainable? So that's kind of the point.
I mean, it depends. I mean, if I think that my lifestyle is already pretty sustainable, then I don't make a lot, and then I could make many more decisions. No, if I feel it's pretty sustainable at the moment,
it's competing concerns. I'm worried about my job. I'm worried about my house. I'm worried about my relationship. I'm worried about sustainability, and I'm worried about writing papers and doing meaningful work. It's a competition of attention issues.
Yeah, it's a competition about what's top on the to-do list. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So sometimes there is space on the to-do list for sustainability issues in my daily life.
Yes.
Sometimes
but
I have
I mean,
to.
if you've already made sustainability the top one on your to-do list many times over, then maybe today you don't have to make it so many more times. You know, your behavior is already routinized and more sustainable.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm cycling to work, so you know, I don't have to think every day about should I take the car or should I take the bike. I mean, just take the bike. That's it.
Yeah, like I don't own a car, so I don't have to think about it.
I do.
So
Just get on my bike.
So the question: how often do you think about sustainability and then changing your life to it's more sustainable? If you have already a reasonably high level of sustainability,
But that's fine. But that's something we have somewhat in common. But then you also have to acknowledge that I have lots of friends who have extremely unsustainable lives.
Yes.
And they don't spend much time thinking about that.
Yeah.
Yes. So the frequency of making decisions isn't an indicator of your sustainability.
No.
Yeah. Good. Let's have coffee.
But it's like the point I keep trying to make is that the sort of agency is the exception rather than the rule. I think I'm turning into a social practice there.